Hey y'all, in today's episode, we are creating fall decor using scrap wood. You can use these decor pieces to style in your own home, give as a gift, or even sell for a profit. I hope you enjoy. For our first project, we're using a 6-foot fence board. This is yellow pine, and you can find that at Lowe's for around $2, or you can get a cedar one for around $4. We're going to make a mark at 42 inches from the top and go ahead and make our cut. With the remainder of the board, we're going to cut 3 7-inch pieces, and then the last piece we're going to cut at 6 3/4 of an inch, so it will only be just a couple of inches left over from this board that we will not be using. Set your 6 3/4 of an inch piece off to the side. We're going to start off with the long board and the 3 7-inch pieces. Add some wood glue to one side and then line that up at the bottom and the edge. I'm just flipping this over so that I can easily access that with my brad nailer. I'm going to add 3 of those nails, and then we can add our other 7-inch piece on the opposite side. Now, if you don't have a brad nailer, you could certainly use a hammer and some small finish nails for this. And then we'll take our last 7-inch piece to add to the top. Now, don't worry about if they're not perfectly straight. As you add that last 7-inch piece, you can pull those out and make sure they're straight as you're nailing it down. Just try to do one side at a time, and then you can make sure that you line the other side up. Then our 6 3/4 of an inch piece will be what we're going to use for the bottom of this. So go ahead and add your glue, and then I'm going to use that brad nailer to secure that in place. So this is what it should be looking like. We're making a porch sign with a flower box at the bottom. And now, because this is pretty rough wood, we've got to go over this with my palm sander to get it really nice and smooth and prep it for stain. I'm using a stain that I already have on hand, as you can tell by the rusty top. This is called Mission Oak, and it's made by Minwax, and it already has the polyurethane in it. I'm going to apply this with a very cheap brush. Make sure you wear some latex gloves or some sort of hand protectant because stain is so hard to get off of your skin. Using a lint-free cloth, I'm going to go over that, remove the excess stain, and blend it in, as well as lighten it up a bit. I did stain this entire piece. Now, if you're going to put real flowers in there, you will need to drill some drainage holes, just depending on, if you're going to use a potted plant or if you're going to put artificial florals in there. While that stain is drying, I'm going to take these wooden letters that I found at Dollar General. These were $1 a piece, and they're about 4 inches tall. I'm going to give each one of these 2 coats of a white paint, making sure that I get the outside edges as well. Once everything is dry, I can then take this back outside to the sign, and we're going to place a piece of tape in the center at the top as well as at the bottom of the sign, just to use as a guide so I can keep these letters centered. Then I'll place my tape measure down so I'll know exactly where to place each one of these. I'm using Gorilla Super Glue to attach each one of the letters. I am placing the bottom of the F at 9 inches from the top, and I'm going to skip over the A because I need to center that up. But when I do place that down, the bottom of the A will be at 15 inches, the bottom of the first L will be at 21 inches, and the bottom of the second L will be at 27 inches. Then I also created a decal on my Cricut, and this is just optional, but I wanted to add a little something extra at the top, and I used the font Hello Honey from defont.com. And depending on where you're going to display this, you may want to put a clear sealant over not only the decal but also the painted letters, just to protect the paint. If you decide to sell any of these projects, as far as the pricing, it really depends on the cost of lumber, the amount of labor that you have in the project, and the area in which you're selling these items. I can't give a definite price, But if you recreate these, I would just look on Facebook Marketplace or local craft shows to find similar items and see how they're pricing their items to determine how you should price yours. Our next project is using the same type of board. I created this one a couple of years ago and it was very popular, so I thought it would be worth it to show you guys again. But if you've already seen it, you can skip ahead to the next project. It measures 5 3/8 of an inch wide, and it is 12 3/4 of an inch tall. And then another piece of that same board, it's going to have the same width, and it is actually 4 3/4 of an inch long. I'm going to use some hot glue to attach the long portion onto the top of the small portion to create a candle holder. Once that hot glue sets up, I'm going to pre-drill 3 holes in the bottom so that I can secure these two pieces together with some wood screws. The hot glue is just going to hold it in place so that I am able to get these wood screws in there. Once I have that done, I'm going to go over this entire piece with a stain, and this is Minwax Mission Oak. It is a very dark stain, but you could paint this or stain it whatever color you like. I'm going to apply it with a Dollar Tree foam brush and then just take a dry paper towel and wipe the excess off and blend it in. I'm going to do this over this entire piece, including the back side. That way, no matter where I sit it, it will have a finished look. Now, this is a large enough piece that you could actually put a hurricane vase on. I'm just going to use an LED candle and 2 of these picks from Hobby Lobby. They have these in their fall floral section. I bought them when they were on sale, and they just have some gorgeous colors in it. I'm going to curve one of these around to form the shape around the outside of the candle. And leave your excess end stem on there because that's what we're going to be using to attach to our other piece. I'm also going to do the other piece the exact same way and curve it around so that I'll be able to attach these two together to form the base ring wreath form for the bottom of our candle. To hold them in place, I'll just take those end pieces and wrap them around each other. Once I have the first one attached, I can pull the second one even tighter to make sure it's going to be a nice fit for the bottom of the candle and attach the end the exact same way. I thought it would be really neat to take a third bundle and attach it to the back of this ring wreath form and hold it up straight. I'm just going to wrap it around that bottom section and then around the bundle itself and then back around the bottom, so that it will stand up straight, and then I can just set this directly on my candle holder and then set my candle down on the inside. I love how this one turned out. It looks very rustic, and you can use this candle holder all year long and change it out for the seasons. For our next project, I have this scrap piece of wood. I actually have 2 of these that my husband brought home. They are about 2 inches wide and they're 7/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to cut down 4 strips at 2 foot each and 1 strip at 26 inches. I'm going to place the longer one in the center and then put a gap in between each little piece because we're going to make sort of like a pallet pumpkin. Because I'm going to keep this piece, I'm just going to freehand the drawing of the pumpkin with a pencil. But if I were to sell this, I would definitely use like a template to trace it out to make sure it's perfect. I'm okay if mine's not perfect. I'm going to cut each of those marks using a jigsaw, and this is only the second time I've ever used a jigsaw, so if you're using that, it is definitely better to do this on a stationary surface. I have like a makeshift table set up with a pallet on some sawhorses. I had to add a cinder block to the bottom and clamp my pallet down because it vibrates everything. And of course, as I'm cutting, I realized that the blade's very dull, so I needed to replace the blade on that. Always make sure you unplug something before you make any kind of changes to it. And now we could try again, and that worked so much better. Now it still vibrates everything, but it was easier for me to cut. I just made sure I clamped each piece down as tightly as I could and cut all of those marks out. And I'm not worried about them being perfect because I can smooth all of that out with some sandpaper. If you have an electric sander, that's going to make the job a lot easier. You can really smooth everything out, especially those rounded edges. Start off with a coarser sandpaper and then work your way up to a finer grit to really get that nice smooth finish. I also cut down 2 thin pieces of wood. These are 10¼ inch long. This is what we're going to use to attach all of our pieces together after we stain it. And after all of this work, I had worked up an appetite, so it was nice and refreshing to have a lunch date with my son and his beautiful girlfriend. Now, as you can see, my son does not want to be on camera, but he was being a really good sport. So now it's time to get back to our project. We're going to be using 3 different colored stains. I have the dark Mission Oak, then I have a red oak, and a red chestnut. Now these are just some stains I already had on hand. As you can tell, they're very rusty, but they're still good because I kept them in my garage. I'm also using some foam brushes, latex gloves, of course, to protect my hands, and some lint-free cloths. I stained the centerpiece of the pumpkin as well as the 2 brace pieces with the Mission Oak so it would have a nice dark color. I made sure to get all sides, including the back, and then of course I used my lint-free cloth to blend it in and remove any excess. The 2 outer pieces, I'm going to use that lighter color of the red chestnut, and then the 2 pieces that are on either side of the centerpiece, I'm going to use the red oak. That way the middle will be the darkest and then the colors will lighten up as it goes to the outside pieces. And I'm going to let this completely dry for several hours before we put our pieces together. I'm going to line them up and then space them out the way I think it looks best. And this is on the back side, so we're going to take those 2 brace pieces and line those up. And to hold them in place, I'm using my brad nailer. Now originally I put just 1 in each board, but as I flipped that over, I felt like it was a little too flimsy. So I'm gonna flip that back over and add another nail in each board. And that made it much more secure and sturdy. And this is how it turned out. For this project, I have some pieces that measure 3 inches by 3 inches. This one's 8 inches long, and the smaller one is 6 inches long. But you could certainly use a 4x4 for this project because a 4x4 is not truly 4 inches wide. I think it's about 3.5 inches. I'm going to give these a really good sanding because they are really rough. I need them to be fairly smooth for what I want to do with these pieces. I found this beautiful removable tile decal at Dollar Tree. It has this nice embossing to it. You will need 2 of these for just that 1 block. Now because the tile is removable, we need to add some Mod Podge to it to really make sure it adheres to the wood well. So I'm going to add a nice thick layer on one side, and once I remove the backing off the tile, I can line that up to the very edge, push it down, and then create the crease on the other side, and we can fold that over, turn it around to the side, and add another layer of Mod Podge to that side of the wood. It's not going to wrap around for the 3rd section, so you will need to take an X-Acto knife or scissors or a utility knife and trim that off. Then we can repeat the process on the 2 remaining sides with the other wall decal. Using a wet wipe or a wet napkin, make sure to go over it and remove any excess Mod Podge that you may have gotten on the outside. And I also found that it was helpful to use my hair dryer to really be able to push that tile decal down to the wood and make sure it adheres well. Then you'll want to set it to the side and let that Mod Podge completely dry. For the smaller block, I'm going to use some beautiful copper colored tile, and I need to trim that down so that it will fit properly lengthwise. And I'm going to repeat the exact same process with this one as we did with the larger block. Once the Mod Podge is completely dry, I'm using some white acrylic paint. I'm going to go ahead and paint the top and bottom of the wood pieces, let that dry, and then I can add a layer to one section at a time on the decal itself. Now this will take 2 coats to cover it up, so I'm going to put a very thin coat, then use my hair dryer to kind of dry that, then add the second coat, use my hair dryer again to dry it, and then I'll just repeat this going around the entire block until all of the wall tile is painted. Now that the paint has thoroughly dried, we're going to take some 120 grit sandpaper and gently go over this to remove the paint from the embossed sections. You can still see that through the paint, and you don't want to rub too rough because you don't want to tear that wall decal. Use just a gentle amount of pressure to remove the paint from the areas that you want to remove it from. I also made sure to do the edges of the block. Then continue to do this until you have all 4 sides done. For the larger block of wood, I decided to use a celery green color, and I did the exact same thing for this one as we did for the first block. I'm using 2 miniature candlesticks. These came from Hobby Lobby in a package of 5 for just a few dollars. They're a little too tall for the stems on our pumpkins, so I'm going to trim just that top piece off using my handsaw and miter box, and then I'm going to go over this to smooth them out with some 80 grit sandpaper and just kind of round that off at the top. Then I used some antique wax and a wet wipe to really give this a nice distressed look and make this go along really well with those distressed blocks. This just gives it a variation of color. It's absolutely gorgeous. Once you kind of wipe that down, it just has some dark spots and some light spots, and I think this is just going to work out perfect for our pumpkins. So now that that's dry, we're going to take some Gorilla Super Glue and glue these to the center at the top of each one. And then I decided to take some raffia and pull a nice long length off, and then just tie a very simple bow around the stem of each of these. I used a small paintbrush and wrapped each end of the raffia around just to create these cute curls, and this is how they turned out. For this project, we're using some 2x4s. One measures 6¼ inches, the other 7½ inches. These need to have a really good sanding. I want them nice and smooth because we're going to make something really cute with these. Using the larger board, measure from the bottom 3 inches and make a mark all the way around, and then draw your line out. This is going to show us which side we need to paint what color, and so that we don't go over those lines. On the smaller one, we're going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to measure up 2 inches. I'm using a burlap colored acrylic paint, and I'm going to paint the top portion of both of these boards on all 4 sides. And it's going to take about 2 coats. Once that dries on the larger board, we're going to paint that bottom half, the 3-inch section that we marked off, in a blue acrylic paint, and this is called Calypso Sky. You don't have to paint your lines perfectly straight. This is pretty much just to give us a guide to make sure that we kind of keep it all the way around the same height. That's going to take 2 coats. The smaller one we're going to cover in this beautiful Dollar Tree fabric. We are going to create a faux seam just by hot gluing the end over maybe about 1 inch. And then once you have that side glued down, we're going to set that up to the bottom part of that shorter 2x4, and we're going to cut some a little bit longer than the 2x4 because we're going to create a faux seam on the opposite side just like we did that one. So you do want it to be just a little bit longer than your 2x4 when you're done. We're going to hot glue one corner down, and then once that glue sets up, pinch it and create like a faux pleat. Then add a little bit of glue on the other side of the pleat, and using a thin paintbrush handle, that tends to help make the pleats about the same size each time. You're going to continue to do this and add a little bit of hot glue on each side until you have this entire 2x4 wrapped all the way around. We are creating a cute dress for our Scarecrow. Now it is time to create the face. Using a pencil, I'm just going to draw it out, and you don't have to worry about it being perfect. That's what makes these so cute. I'm also using a regular black Sharpie, a fine tip Sharpie, white acrylic paint, spice pumpkin paint, the same blue paint, and a black paint. This is how she's looking, and now we're going to work on the boy Scarecrow. I'm going to use some of that same fabric that we created the dress with to create our boy Scarecrow a scarf. So I'm just going to trim a thin piece down, wrap that around where the 2 paint colors meet, and then secure that in place with some hot glue. Using the black Sharpie, I created some faux stitching just around the outside edges. We can now hot glue some raffia to create some hair. I'm going to have mine a little bit longer on the sides and then some bangs in the front. For the girl Scarecrow, I created a braid to go on each side and also give her some bangs. For their hats, I'm going to use this burlap from Walmart. It's pretty thin, so I'm going to double it up and hot glue the two ends together so you won't be able to see through it. And I'm going to create two of these because both of them are going to have the exact same hat. Then we're going to add some glue right along where the top of the raffia is, lay our fabric down, and then hot glue it on the back side. Then you can gather it together right above where the wood is, and we're going to secure that in place with some twine. Just double or triple knot it and add a little bit of glue under your knot to make sure everything stays in place. We'll go ahead and cut the excess twine off of his, but for her, we're going to leave a bow in the front so it matches the bows at the end of her braids. And this is how they turned out. I think they're absolutely adorable, and I would love to know what you guys think. The next project is another very popular project I did a couple of years ago that I thought you might enjoy. So I'm going to be using some decking boards. I'm going to sand all of these down, and one of them is 14 inches, the one I'm sanding now, and then one is 17 inches and two are 21 inches long. So I'm going to paint the 14 inch, 17 inch, and one of the 21 inches on all sides with that Spice Pumpkin paint color. And then for the other 21 inch piece, I'm going to take some acrylic paint in the color Brown Oxide and water that down, mix it up really well. And I'm going to use this as a stain. So this is a great way to create your own stain. And also, if you don't like the fumes that regular stain puts out, that is a great alternative. I'm going to use 3 of these Dollar Tree wood leaf cutouts, and I'm going to apply that same paint mixture stain on both sides of each one of these. I am also going to be using one of these wood word cutouts from Hobby Lobby. They are super thick, nice quality, and that's $1.49 a piece. I'm going to apply that same stain mixture to the front of this wood cutout, and then I'm going to let all of those dry. Using 3 stems from a previous floral bundle that I've already used the flowers on, I'm going to create tendrils to go with these leaves by wrapping those around the end of a paintbrush handle, and then I can just kind of pull those out a little bit. I'm going to slide that through the hole at the top of the leaf till it makes at least one rotation through that hole, and then using some pliers, I'm going to twirl that around to make a loop and close that shut and make it sit flat on the back of the leaf. Then I can twist that around in the front to get it to lay where I want it to be on the front of the leaf. Using a piece of jute rope, I'm going to feed that through that closed loop that I put in the back and leave a nice long strand and cut that off. I'm going to do that for the other 2 leaves as well, so they're going to be looking just like this. And now we can start creating our wreath for the front of our project. Using one of Dollar Tree's 8-inch wreath forms, they come in a pack of 2. I'm going to use 4 bundles of their maple leaves as well as 3 bundles of their pumpkin filler. I'm going to cut the stems off of each one of these bundles so that I can create my own bundles. I'm going to alternate it so that I have orange and yellow leaves, 3 or 4 sections of those leaves together, and then place one of the pumpkin fillers with the pumpkin and the green leaves on top, and use some floral wire to wrap that around the ends of that very tightly, and then tuck those end pieces down to make sure they're not going to scratch anything once you put it on your project. And I'll do that for all of those little pre-made bundles that I made. Once I have all of those attached, we can then take that same floral wire and wrap it around the inside part of our floral wreath and make sure it's nice and tight and leave it attached to the paddle part. So you don't want to cut your wire off, you want to leave it on there, and then we're going to bend each of these bundles around so that they'll take the shape of our wreath form. Then we can take that wire and wrap it around the stem of each of the bundles very, very tightly and attach it to the wreath form and leave the wire on the paddle so that the next bundle, once I shape it so it takes the curve of the wreath form, I'm going to overlap that at the bottom where we just wrapped the stems with the floral wire, and then I could pull that floral wire down and wrap those stems. So you don't have to keep cutting your floral wire, you can just keep wrapping it around until you get your entire wreath filled with your bundles. Then you can cut it off when you get your last bundle on there, and then twist it around and make sure that you tuck that end piece down so it doesn't scratch anything. I'm going to use some of these fairy lights from Dollar Tree. I'm going to attach this to the back of our wire wreath form by cutting 2 strands of floral wire and feeding that through the frame of our wreath so that I'll be able to secure the battery pack right there into the grooves of the back of that. I'm just going to twist that floral wire around on each end, and then I just went ahead and took a piece of Scotch tape to make sure that that wire doesn't scratch anything. Then I'm going to take my lights and just feed that around the wreath and tuck it down, and I made sure that I turned my lights on so I'll know the placement of all the lights and make sure it's nice and full all the way around, and just kind of tuck it in between the leaves until you have it looking really nice. And if you have any extra left over, I just wrap that around the battery pack. Now we can attach our welcome word to the front. I'm going to feed a piece of floral wire through the E and twist that around in the back nice and tight, and I'll do the same thing through the loop on the W. Then I can use those 2 pieces of floral wire to attach this to the wire part of our wreath form by feeding that down, flipping it around, and twisting it really tightly on both ends, and then tucking any of that excess down. Now we can start assembling our piece together. I'm going to go ahead and place the tallest board in the middle, and then I'm using some of the same size boards on the side to help me hold those in place so that I can hot glue them together. So I'm going to place the base portion up at the bottom to make sure everything's going to stay flush at the bottom, and then I'm going to use some hot glue just to hold those 2 boards to the back board, where we're going to put some secureness in the bottom of the base. So this is just to help hold those 3 pieces together, and then I'm going to hold that on top of the base. Make sure I have the same distance on each end so everything's centered up and it's kind of in the center of the middle. And then using a pencil, I went on the back side and made 6 markings so I would know where to pre-drill my holes so that I can attach this with some screws. So when I made my markings on the back, when I'm pre-drilling, I just kind of moved that up just a little bit to make sure it's going to go in the center of my wood rather than on the back side of it. Then I'm going to attach each one of my screws until a little bit of that screw comes through at the top part of the base. So I'll make sure I can line everything up with those 3 pieces at the top. And then I've got some wood setting under that to make sure it keeps it all at one level. And then I went ahead and screwed in each end piece first and then went back in and screwed in the middle pieces. So it should be looking something like this when you get done. I'm going to use some of Dollar Tree's wood stems to attach to the center of each one with some hot glue to make the stems for our pumpkins. Now we can add those beautiful leaves that we made with those tendrils on it, and I'm going to wrap that around each one of the stems twice, and then I'm going to double knot it on the back and then cut the excess off. I went ahead and pre-drilled a hole in the back, laced my screws so I could hang my wreath on there. I hope you enjoyed today's projects, and if you have a favorite, let me know in the comment section down below. I always love to know which one is your favorite. If you haven't subscribed already, I would love for you to click that subscribe button right below the video. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.